Welcome. I'm Cami Bean, and joining me today is Paul Welch. We are going to be talking about 4 key approaches to personalizing learning experiences today. I'm a solutions consultant with Kineo. If you don't know who we are a global learning solutions organization. I'm here in Massachusetts. Paul is in UK, where we were originally founded. I've been with Kineo for 13, 14 years. And have been in the learning design business for about 25. Really excited to talk with you today. Paul, want to tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Paul Welch. I think, Cami, you just picked me in terms of length in the industry. I've been doing this for about 22 years now, instructional design background. I've been with Kineo for, I think, 15 in December.
Yeah, Paul was my support. We were both learning designers for the first many years at Kineo, and he was my go-to person helping me figure out how we did things here at Kineo. Great, so let's get started. Alex is going to be sharing out recordings of this, of course, so we'll share the slides and the recording. We also are going to give you a unique opportunity where after the session, Alex will be sending out a link to a one-on-one session. If you would like to schedule a consultation with one of our digital learning consultants and talk about your next project, we are excited to have that conversation with you. So look for that coming in your inbox after the session. And let's just dive right in.
Right.
So personalization. Why do we think this matters? Well, apparently 93% of companies feel that personalization learning is really critical and important. So that's a Brandon Hall Group survey. Presumably you are here because you feel the same. And it will be interesting to see how comfortable people feel. You know, you could share in the chat, are you doing this already? Are you doing personalization, or does this feel kind of hard? I think for a lot of people, it feels hard. It's AI and complicated tools, but we're here to break that down and simplify that a little bit today.
Yeah, hopefully we've got some kind of really simple techniques that will show the value of and how easy some of these can be to implement. So I think without further ado, so what is personalization? So I think a lot of people, when they think of personalization, will think of kind of AI-driven personalization that they encounter in everyday lives, things like Netflix, Spotify, web browsing, web advertising, and so on. And they are all personalized experiences, and they're all, of course, platform-driven solutions. And most of the advanced personalized learning solutions are also platform-driven solutions. And many of them are fantastic, things like recommendation engines, adaptive learning platforms, and the like. They can all be really, really superb tools. But there's a couple of things you need to be mindful of with those. There's scale. You need a lot of content for those to work as intended to align learning with all of the different gaps in a cohort of learners. And there's cost. Platforms are expensive compared to content. That's a reality, and they often need to sit alongside an LMS, which is serving up all of your organization's non-adaptive content as well. The good news is we can do a lot of things at the course level, not the platform level, that can offer you some kind of real benefits in terms of the effectiveness of the learning and the savings that can offer. So that's really the focus of the webinar today. So what are the benefits of personalized learning? So
yeah, why do we do this, Paul? Why does this matter? 93% of people say it matters.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, in my opinion, Cami, I think there's 3 key reasons. I think the first is increased engagement and motivation. So what do we mean by that? Well, a personalized experience that is more closely aligned to an individual's expertise, their needs, their goals, is going to resonate a lot more with them than one big homogenous one-size-fits-all course. The course learning is for them, not everyone. So it speaks to them on a personal level. Yeah, when we personalize content for people, they feel seen, they feel heard. Yeah, they're not wading through stuff that is completely irrelevant to them. And I think we'll come and talk. That's a bit of a reoccurring theme you should expect, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. I think the second is it helps with retention, which is obviously why we're doing this in the first place. Tailored content, if it matches a learner's own needs, if it's presented in an authentic and relevant context, then that's going to be more easily acquired and assimilated into their existing framework of knowledge than something that is completely irrelevant and has them shrugging, and saying, what do I care? This has got nothing to do with me. That can be a real danger in this kind of sheep dip approach to learning. So I think that's a real benefit. And then the other thing is it saves time, and we'll come on to this at the end of the webinar and look at a worked example. But it speaks for itself, really. Obviously, if you're removing unnecessary content for groups of learners, this will reduce the overall course duration. And there's two benefits: one for the learner, one for the company. You've got learners that are being, facing a barrage of demands on their time and attention, so they will definitely thank you for not having to do something that they don't need to. But so will the business. Even a modest reduction in seat time can lead to some surprisingly large savings when applied to an entire cohort of learners. So I think they're our kind of 3 big ticket benefits of personalization. So we're going to look at a bit of a poll here, aren't we, Cami?
We are going to look at a poll, Paul. So, really think about why have organizations not embraced personalization more broadly, and what are those obstacles? So let's pull up our poll. What do you see as the biggest barriers to taking a more personalized approach? Is it's too complex? It's too expensive? We don't know how to do it. That's why we're at this webinar, Cami and Paul. There's probably some other reasons as well. So we'll see what you guys say. And we're watching the results come pouring in real time. It's very exciting. You probably can't see them this way. We'll give it another 10 seconds. If you're out there listening, watching, answer the poll. We want to make it personal and have your voice be heard. All right, I think we can publish this out now.
Yep.
Oh, kind of equally tied. Interesting. So a lot of you said it's too complex. We don't know how to do it. Those are probably tied together. And so that was at 38% for each of those. And it's too expensive as the third option, but that's still a pretty high 25%, right? So it feels kind of daunting. How do we do this? It's too complicated. We don't have AI tools. We don't have some fancy robot that's feeding us exactly the right content that we need. So we're going to take you on a tour. Yeah. And we are going to go through 4 tips today, 4 areas, and we're going to throw in some bonus things along the way. So it might be more than 4 at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the good news is that all of these, certainly 2 or 3 of them, are really, really accessible, easy to do techniques that will kind of reap rewards with not too much in the way of effort or complexity. So I think without further ado, let's take a look at the first one. All
right, our first one, role selectors. So making use of role selector. What do we mean by that, Paul? What does that mean?
So essentially, a role selector is probably one of the easiest approaches to implement. And what we mean by it is, at the beginning of a course, learners are provided with some kind of mechanism where they can select either their role or their role, their region, their level of experience, whether they're a manager or not, or any other variable that could be used to tailor content for an individual. We can also take some data from the LMS as well. So it may be that you don't even need some kind of mechanism to use your LMS to feed information from their profile, and we can use that to shape what the learner subsequently sees.
Sure. For example, we use Totra with a lot of our clients, which is a learning management system platform, and Totra has really powerful audience management. So you can set, based on a user's profile, what content they're even seeing at that level, right? So Paul's, on the solutions consulting team, he sees this content. Cami's on the design team, she sees this content. So-and-so's on the development team, he sees something totally different. So you can have the LMS drive that, but mostly what we're going to focus on today is going to be things that you can do within a course itself.
Yeah, that's right. And you can even there's little things you can do as well, like you can take the learner's name from the LMS and put that in the course and give a personal greeting. That's a really simple, tiny element of personalization that has been proven from research to actually have an uptick in engagement with the course content as well. There's little things like that you can do as well that are kind of quick wins. But role selection, kind of why use it? So it's a really simple way, essentially, of creating a curated learner journey for an individual. So based on that information that we've gathered at the beginning of the course, we can remove or replace content which isn't needed for someone. We can just provide content that really matters to them. So as we mentioned in the intro, really, less irrelevant material, more focused, more useful context is going to lead to a better all-round learning experience. And as we've already said, removing material is going to reduce seat time. So we're saving the business money as well, which is obviously important. So let's take a look at what a typical role selector looks like. They're not the most exciting things in the world to look at, but they are very, very useful. So in this example here, what we've got is a two-stage role selector. In this area to the left, we've got all different sectors of a bank where people might work, and you click on one and it tells you in more detail whether you are likely to be in that role or not, because obviously the organization at the operational level, that kind of language doesn't always filter down to maybe some juniors that work in a particular area. So this is a tool that allows people to ascertain what part of the business they're in, and then they simply.
And Paul, how does that work though? Is this the first screen of the course when you when you launch a module from your LMS? This will be the first thing you see.
Yeah, or it might follow a welcome screen that sets direction, but yeah, it's typically one of the very early screens you've seen, and then normally there's a statement that makes it clear why we're asking for this in the first place. Selling the benefits of selecting this and being open and honest about why you should make the correct choice. So you find out where within the business you sit, and then you simply click on one of these icons. And it's as simple as that. And then off of that, we can then do all kinds of really cool things in the course. So we can change out case studies, we can change out questions, we can change out entire sequences of content. We can remove, if it's a global company and you're UK based, we can remove out all of the legislation for the US and other parts of the world. So it's from a few simple clicks, it's a really powerful tool, and it's also really simple to implement. We just tag certain content with certain values, and then we get the role selector talking to the content, and then we show and hide accordingly. So it's quite.
So it's a tagging process on the back end. And we do, for those who don't know, we do a lot of content building in Adapt, and this, which is an open source e-learning framework. So this is a powerful feature that we can take advantage of with Adapt.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's probably the kind of entry point for personalization. It's really, really simple to do, offers some real kind of quick wins for learner and organization. So conscious of we've got a fair bit to get through. So that's role selection. I know, Cami, we've got a couple of bonus ideas that are kind of in the same.
We've got some bonus ideas. It's just fun to show other things that you can do. So kind of not quite fully a role selector, but for some segments, some audience groups, having a character or an avatar that you build in the course to personalize the experience and how you go through it can also have powerful impact. So here on the left, you choose one of these 4 characters, and that will persist throughout the course. So it feels like I'm in construction because I am in construction and I've chosen that. Or here on the right, you can actually create, using some variables, a character that will go through you. And maybe this person looks like you or someone that you like. And that's just a little touch. It's not quite as powerful personalization feature as role selector because it's not influencing the content, but it's influencing the content experience as you go through it. Now, another way that we've done this, can go to the next one. This is a course on financial preventing fraud. Instead of selecting the character to represent you, you're choosing which customer you want to protect through this course. And it's making this meaningful, really powerful and meaningful connection between you, the learner, and the people in the world that you are trying to protect. And this particular course has some gamification. So as you go through it, you're saving this customer money. And I picked Mavis, and I've saved Mavis a total of $25,000. And that makes me really happy because Mavis, looks like my mom, and I feel a great sense of goodwill. And it sort of taps into that motivation and that emotional level in a nice way. We've also got obviously translations and languages. We have many of our clients are global customers, and you may be needing to translate for those audiences. Here we have, this is a first screen in the course, and you get to pick. You can decide if you want to see it in English or German. Maybe I'm practicing my German and I want to go through it, or maybe I know that English is my company's main business language and I'm really trying to practice those skills. So we give people some choices. That's a very powerful but simple way to create a more personal experience for them.
And it should be said that role selection and language selection can work in harmony, can't they? They're not mutually exclusive. You don't need one or the other.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, you could do both. You could do all of these things in one.
You
So what's another top tip? What do you got to be aware of when you're doing this, Paul?
I think the big thing to consider with role selection is completion criteria. So if you're going to apply role selection, a kind of key takeaway is just be mindful that not everyone is going to see all of the course content when you've got a role selector in place, because that's the whole point, right? So you need to consider what material is mandatory for learners, what's personalised, and then you need to just think through how you can reflect that in the completion criteria. If you're basing completion on a final assessment, you don't need to worry. But if it's based on seeing everything in a course, then you just need to just think through an approach that's going to allow you to do that. And there are lots of ways of doing it. It's just a bit beyond the remit of today in terms of the time.
Craig has a question in the Q&A pod about, he asks, is the role selector for new hires or incumbents or both? If for incumbents, what drives them to even seek out learning?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, the kind of big ticket item for these types of things is compliance training. You know, we all go to the LMS and do our annual compliance training. I think that's a real kind of obvious win for personalization, because a lot of people are going to be going there. They're going to have done the course already. So, and we'll come on to techniques about that in a moment. But yeah, something that people have to do regularly, I think, is a really good starting point for personalization.
And then Zaha, I'm sure I just did not say your name right. What's the role selector feature called in Adapt? Is this one of the extensions? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if that's something that we filled out. We can follow up on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in the standard suite of plugins for Adapt.
Great. All right, we're going to keep moving. We got to keep going, Paul. We've got a lot to get through.
We have. So,
all right, number 2, test out, which might also be called a pre-test or a diagnostic test.
Yeah.
Paul, tell us what that's all about.
Okay, so I mean, this is one where we probably encounter the most cautiousness with clients, particularly around compliance subjects. But personally, I think this has probably got some of the biggest potential benefits. So let's have a look why. So it's a really simple concept. It's a pre-test which allows the learner to prove their current levels of competency in some or all of the course content. And then this is used to determine what's mandated for them in the course. So essentially we can say, you know what, you've passed modules 1, 2, and 3. You don't need to do them this year. Let's just focus in on modules 3 and 4 and test those. So lots to recommend this, I think. Let's have a look why. So five key reasons why to use it, I think. Get active immediately. What do I mean by that? So we're introducing key concepts straight off the bat. We're offering challenge. We're incentivizing learners in terms of, look, you can do a much smaller course. We're stimulating curiosity and engagement. So essentially, we're making them active from the get-go. So I think there's a fair bit to recommend it there. So flagging the gaps by exposing our learners to kind of knowledge gaps, we're increasing their motivation to fill the gaps and gain a new skill. We're giving them a roadmap really on how to improve by using this. And when it's aligned with a performance scorecard, which we'll come to, it's a really powerful solution. So what do I mean by share the love? So we can win hearts and minds really by kind of demonstrating that the company is a trusted partner with the learner. We're saying that we're respectful of their levels of skill and competence, but we're also here to help with their training needs. So you're acknowledging that there's a level of know-how in the business and in the individual. And that, I think, to the point that was raised earlier around, people that have been in the business a while and what's incentivizing them to do learning. Well, in this instance, it's quite obvious that, that there's a benefit to them engaging with this. So tailored learning paths via test outs lead to a reduction in time. It means that people have only got to work on the things that they really need to. And again, this reoccurring theme, it saves the business time too. So that's test out. That's kind of the rationale for using it. I'm just going to stop sharing and just find an example of kind of like a course page that has got this in.
Awesome. And while you're doing that, there's a question about how do you, which is great. How do you sell lawyers and compliance folks on the approach for compliance training? That's been a challenge. They have an ugly tendency to want everyone to see everything, right? Every piece of content. It's the law. You've got to do it. And yet we do this approach for a lot of compliance training courses because people do start to see the value. At some of our client companies, they have to take hours and hours of required training every year. How do we reduce that seat time and get people to focus on it? And if you're designing a program that's really focused on reducing risk and teaching the right skills and behaviors and is not about just ticking the box, you're going to have a more effective experience. I'm sure, Paul, you'll have more to add to this, and it would be great if all of our design team could be on this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, that works on the assumption that just by putting everything up on the screen, people are going to really learn from it and are really engaged. And that we know that that isn't the reality. It's I think about treating your learners as adults. And also the other thing is, and we come on to this in the tip at the end, if you have a really, really robust test out that is the equal or better than the final assessment, what's the problem? If it's just as robust and just as challenging to pass that based on what you already know, then I think you can make a really good case for saying, the test outs is going to save us money. It's improving the learning experience. It's reducing frustration. Ultimately in the business, you would want, in an ideal situation, everyone passing the test out until some change in legislation or processes occur within the business, and then people kind of fall foul of that knowledge gap, and then they plug that gap. That's the kind of promised land, really, right?
It's writing hard questions. It's making
Yeah,
them application based and helping people see how they're going to apply this. That's what matters, not what does this acronym stand for? Don't give them softball questions. You want to make it hard. All right, so let's see what you got here, Paul.
Are you seeing on my screen grab, Camille? So this is from a live proposal that we're working on at the minute for a customer. So this is a suite of compliance training in one big SCO. They are organized into 3 families of content. So you can test out on what each of the values, the 3 values. So if I take the test, and I've taken this test already, I've passed data privacy awareness. I don't need to do anything. I'm good. However, on diversity and inclusion and belonging and cybersecurity, there's a shortfall. Now, with this one, and this is picking up on that point as well, Cami, around seeing everything. I've worked for all of the content. I have to retake a test to prove my competence in that. Just because there was a gap in my knowledge doesn't mean to say that I'm not reassessed. So I come in and I do that again. Here, the same thing will happen once I've worked for all the content. The test will become active, and I can't move on to the next value and take that test until value 1 test out or course content has all been complete. So I just wanted to show that, because that's a way that you kind of show the relationship. I should also say that this has a role selector as well.
Ooh, 2 for the price of 1.
I know, right? So
we're just going to show some pretty examples right now of some additional ways we've presented test out features for audiences.
Okay.
On to the next slide, Paul. So this was another compliance course. We built this as an escape room, so for each, learners had to work through a series of rooms to get through all of the content for this particular compliance course. We gave them that choice up front. Do you want to take the fast pass challenge, which is really a test out? If you pass that, you don't have to go explore the room because you know everything. If you fail the fast pass, you are routed to the room, and that's where you go through the content. And at the end of going through the room, you then take an opt-out feature, or the test out feature. Here's another example. This is a payments security course. As you go through it, you're going to be answering a whole series of questions. You can go ahead to the next one. So just to see, like, these are challenging questions. What should an engineer consider when adding, they have to think through all these very options in this pre-test. And then it's going to actually customize the menu for them. As they get into the course, you can see that a bunch of topics have already been completed. I don't have to go through them because the status bar is filled. But the last 2 I will need to go through. So I've seen that time savings. All right. This is not quite a test out function, but this is something that we like to interject. It's more of like a BuzzFeed style quiz. And as you go through, you answer a series of questions. And it's kind of like in Cosmopolitan or a magazine. Based on how you answered, you get a label or a title. Well, I went through that InfoSec course, and I was called a fixer based on the way I answered things. And they're different levels. And the way this serves to, it's not tailoring the content later, but it's helping the learner focus in a very specific way on where they are today and where they need to move. So it creates a little bit more personal motivation. You've seen me, I'm a fixer, but there's probably some areas that I need to keep working on. So those can be pretty easy to implement. All right. What's the challenge with this one though?
I think it's already been alluded to, really. The right scope and approach is key if you want confidence in your test out. And, I don't want to repeat ourselves, but I think the secret is really challenging questions, probably that are linked together. You need to pass a sequence of 3 or 4 really challenging questions that relate to a given topic to prove that competence. Make it, if better than the final assessment was going to be, to test understanding. And I think that's the way you've got to think about it. So branching, we ummed and ahed on this one, didn't we, Cammy, to include it? But I think on reflection, it definitely does belong in the world of personalization. So
yeah, it's really throwing the learner into the story and making them part of the story, right? Branching is what, choose your own adventure style, where you get to decide if I'm gonna, if you throw the rock, you're gonna go to page 52. If you're gonna do this, you're gonna go to page 78. I have stacks of these books in my house. My husband was a huge fan of them when he was a kid.
I played them as a kid too.
But in e-learning, we call it branching. And you can do it with simple text and graphics. You can do it with higher end video. There's lots of ways to do it, but it pulls the learner into the story and lets them really control the outcome.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing about branching, is that you're in control of the experience, but it gives you a chance to fail in the safe environment of a simulated situation rather than out in the real world. And we'll kind of explore that in a bit more detail in terms of the benefits, why you use it. So number 1, quicker outcomes for experts. What do we mean by that? Well, basically it's like a bit of a posh test out, really. If you've got expertise, you can kind of work through it serenely, select all the right choices, and you can reach a kind of satisfactory outcome in 5 minutes, while a novice will be heading down dead ends, hitting killer questions that puts them back to the beginning. So, it has that inherent diagnostic quality about it. So that kind of inbuilt branching logic is what really makes it a personalized experience. I think the other 2 points are really important. So learning at the point of failure. So when you fail in a branch, it's immediately obvious, and we can provide help right in the moment. And we can say, right, that's a really bad choice. This is why. Go back, try again. There's no disconnection between the point of failure, say in a final assessment, and the content that you might have looked at an hour before. I think, and related to that really is the that kind of immediate application of learning. So because you're free to explore the content as you wish and use trial and error, you might fail and then rewind and immediately go, I've just done that. That's not good. I'm going to go down path B instead of path A, because I know that the previous path leads to some kind of negative outcome. So it's that kind of call and response, immediate application of learning. And it's this is based on something called a constructivist learning model, which is basically where kind of learners are allowed to construct their own kind of knowledge frameworks via trial and error. And it's actually how we learn some of our kind of fundamental.
Well, and what's kind of interesting, like, it may not save time in the long run, because if you go through and try all the variations, like if you're that kind of learner and you want to see all of the outcomes, it might take you more time. But think about that in terms of retention, in terms of application. You see all of the approaches, you're going to learn that better. It reminds me, some of the video practice tools that are out there, they say that a video practice tool, you can record yourself responding to a customer objection, and then you post it and you get your manager to review you doing that, right? And they've seen better outcomes for individuals who post, like they try it 7 times before they decide to post, right? It's through that repetition. We know through repetition we're going to learn, and it's kind of the same thing with branching. You can try it all these different ways. So encourage people to go down the wrong branch and see what happens. Don't penalize them for it.
I think it's quite fun as well. I think people enjoy exploring all of the various avenues, and it's really, the philosophy is you're using it rather than losing it. You're immediately kind of putting that learning into practice. So there's 2 kinds of branching. There's deep, scary branching like this. This is the gold standard. It really is a fantastic model, but you do need to be mindful of the fact that it's going to take a lot of scope and a fair bit of design effort to do really well.
And more development effort, so it feels more complicated. Now, some tools allow you to do branching. In Storyline, for example, it's pretty easy, and Adapt has some branching functionality, but this gets overwhelming fast to a lot of teams. Just don't have the time.
You're looking there at something that's 12 screens long, and an expert could complete in probably 3 or 4 correct questions. So that shows the power of, if you know how to navigate a given situation, how it acts as that diagnostic feature, and how, if you are getting things wrong. You end up in dead ends or, you know, fail loops, and you have to go back to the beginning and so on. There is, however, a simplified model called shallow branching. With this, you never head off down any of those blind alleys. You always stay on the golden path. So you attempt a question. If you get it wrong, you get put back into that question with some feedback. The option is alphaed out or disabled, and you can then reattempt that question, or by one of the other two options. Ultimately, it filters down to leave the correct option, and you move on.
And ideally, what you do in the feedback is you provide great instruction. You say, ooh, that choice wasn't so great. That resulted in Paul, you know, smashing the bottle down on the ground, cutting his foot, and, you know, having to go to the hospital.
You might want to think about
try a better choice, or, you know, think through a different option. So you keep them always moving forward. I call it fake branching, faux branching. It's sometimes
branching, shallow branching. It's very similar. It offers many of the benefits of branching without some of the kind of scope realities and design considerations that you need to think through. So, conscious of time, so I'll just flash up a quick example of branching of a course that we've done for a London law firm, big London law firm. So we have our video, our setup video. We've got something called a social MCQ here, so we gauge how comfortable or uncomfortable with what we've just seen. We then use Kineo Analytics to show how my choice stacks up with everyone else that's done the learning. So it's a kind of a summary of all of the trend data, as it were, of previous people that have done it. I can see maybe that I'm an outlier, and I probably need to reflect on my thoughts on this subject matter. I then master make a choice. I make my choice. I see the ramifications of my choice. And to Cammy's point, I didn't do so well. We've dropped in a recognized thought leader from the business is explaining why the choices I've just made probably weren't so great, and I need to go back, try again, being mindful of these points. Cammy, we've got a few more branching examples here. Do we?
I'll do them fast. I promise you. All right. So this is just a menu. Again, this is giving that learner that choice, the path that they want to take. You can choose to drop right in and take the challenge, the scenario work, or you can go in and get all the content. You get to choose. So this is a really simple form of branching, but it allows the learner to choose the path that they go. And you can still make them both requirement, but we give a lot of choice. I think some of our design team is on this, and I threw these in because I just love this course. It's a course on diversity, equity, and inclusion. They've made this a personal experience by asking you, as you start off on this course, to really consider at a very emotional, basic level, you know, what matters to you? Which element of you do you love most? You can keep going. So I chose personality. I love my personality the most. You know, each of us, this is all through the storytelling, who each loves something special about themselves, just like you, right? So I love my ethnicity, my sexuality, my tattoos, my gender, right? We're making it really personal through the story. When someone says something negative about my personality, I feel shame. I feel it in my, you know, in my body. And now if we go on to the next screen here, we've actually pulled that variable. It's natural to feel shame. I feel totally seen now. Oh, other people feel shame too. And now I'm going to read some stories from other people. I just think this is a really powerful example of creating a personalized experience by injecting the learner into it, having them think and reflect on their own experience, and helping them see really why this content matters. And I love this course. So that's my quick example. Buy one, get two free.
Yeah.
No, buy one, get two.
So just a quickie here, really. I think the shallow branch model, as it can be used to replace several things. You can use it as a test out / final assessment due to many of the reasons we've just said, but you know, it acts inherently as a gateway where you need to demonstrate competence to proceed. I think it can also replace a menu, because at the points of failure, you can drop in tutorial content to help you improve your performance and then reattempt that question. That could also be personalized. So if you daisy chain 3 or 4 questions together and you failed a question, you could then say, you know what, you failed question 2, that's on subject ABC. Here's a bit of learning, do it, go in, try again, and then pass through that gateway. So again, just it's based on something called a challenge and support model. So you're presented with a challenge, and if you fail, you get the support you need at the point of need to pass through that gateway and reach the end. So that's just something to consider in terms of how you might use a shallow branch as an approach. Cammy, performance scorecards. Is Cami still there?
Sorry, I think the dog was barking. I'm on mute. Sorry about that. The dog was barking. I forgot I did that. All right. So what did I say? It was brilliant. The power of performance scorecard. So what's a performance scorecard? It's essentially for what it's a way to make your performance through the course really explicit. We've tied, let's say it's a scenario-based experience, and because life is tricky and life is complicated and gray, there's not always a clear right or wrong answer, but there might be weighted options. There might be weighted scores for the questions as you go through it. In this case, we've got completion, revision, optional elements. It's probably not the best example. Maybe it's customer service meter, point of sale, dollar amount, and production team satisfaction. So based on the choices that you make, we're keeping track of those scores and we're making those visible to the learner so that they can understand exactly how they're doing on key indicators and where they might need to learn and grow and improve. It's a really powerful way to make that explicit and to understand what certain choices are, where there might not be a perfect outcome. Like I said, it's not always black and white what the right answer is. So when there's a subtle nuance, usually it's soft skills, you can see what those trade-offs are for different choices. And then it helps the learner focus in on where they need to work going forward. So if we look at an example here, this is a course on managing trade-offs, and Sue is a new manager and she has to decide along the way how she's going to react to her team members who need her help. Someone's coming to her with help. She makes a choice, and based on her response, she did great on employee satisfaction, great on job satisfaction. Productivity went down though. So that may not have been the best choice, but it was actually okay. So you can see what those trade-offs are. So that performance scorecard will actually go with you throughout the course. So it's not just question by question. Up in the top left corner, we keep the tally, and later on you can see your final score. A simpler way of doing this is a morale meter, or it doesn't have to be called a morale meter. In this particular course, it was a morale meter, but rather than having 3 buckets, we were just keeping track of morale for this course for firefighters, which seems there is a reason why that makes sense. So this example is built in storyline. As you go through the course, you're scoring on different questions and improving, hopefully, that the morale of the overall fire department based on the decision you're making. So it just puts that performance out there in a very tangible way to help the learner keep that top of mind, because ultimately what matters? Performance. All right, Paul, we're going to go through a worked example now, which is really to help you see how all of these benefits tie together, how it can pull together and have a real impact on the business.
Yeah, we are. So we're going to take like a typical 1-hour course on information security, which I'm sure we've all encountered many times. So what does this course look like? Well, it starts with a welcome. We've got 5 modules in this course, and we've got a assessment of 10 minutes. The standard content that you're going to encounter in this course is 5 topics. So topic 1, what's information security and why is it important? What information needs to be secured, what the threats we face, what are procedures and policies for securing information, and what role do you play as an individual. So our learner works through our 50 minutes of content. Along the way, they encounter region and role content that applies to everyone. So that's kind of increased the scope of the course. And then go in to do the assessment. They fail module 4, so they come in, do module 4 again. Work through assessment, attempt number 2, and they pass. And that's given us a total course duration of 80 minutes, give or take. So that seems a perfectly reasonable kind of example of what a non-personalized course experience might look like. But what could that look like if we applied some basic personalization techniques to it? So we begin with a region and role selector. So we've obviously touched on that already. We've made some choices about who we are, where we work. We've then got a personalized welcome screen based on that information. We're taking our name from the LMS. We've got our topics here. Then we're going to come in and we're going to do our test out. So 10 minutes to test out. So counterintuitively, we're actually adding scope at the beginning of the course. Work through the test out. We're doing this on a topic basis. So I've completed topic 1. I've got 100% there. I don't need to do topic 1. I carry on. I work through the test out. And upon completion of the test out, it shows me that I've passed modules 1 and 2, but 3, 4, 5 are going to need some work. So what next? Go back to the menu. You can see that the modules 1 and 2 are optional now, but 3, 4, and 5 are required learning. So 20 minutes of scope saved in modules 1 and 2. Work through modules 3, 4, and 5. Now you'll see that in modules 4 and 5, due to my role, I'm only seeing UK legislation and the fact I'm employee only. I'm not seeing any US legislation in this example, and I'm not a line manager. So I've actually saved 5 minutes of content there just by removing content from using the role selector. I come in, my assessment's only 6 minutes long because I'm only being assessed on modules 3, 4, and 5. I fail module 5, so I come in, do module 5 again, and then I redo my assessment. This time it's only a 2-minute assessment because I've already passed modules 1, 2, 3, and 4 now. I get a pass. So that's a total duration of 53 minutes. So that's quite a big difference from the 80 minutes. And I don't think we've been too kind of prescriptive or too optimistic in the way personalization might work. We've tried to be quite fair in terms of a learner of similar capability and experience. So that's 20 minutes saving on that course. Now, if we look at a case study, reasonably large company of say 7,000 employees, what does that kind of start looking like in terms of numbers? So we've got 27 minutes, 7,000 employees, that's 189,000 minutes of seat time saved, or just over 3,000 hours. So if we kind of put that in a monetary perspective, a very quick Google average salary, $25 per hour to employ someone, parity with the pound at the minute, you can probably just replace one for the other. And that I suspect in some industries that's going to be a lot higher. But for a pretty average annual rate, hourly rate, you're looking at a saving there of £78,000 if all 7,000 people made savings like that. Now, some are going to make more, some are going to make less. But
you just paid for your course.
You've probably paid for 2.
Yeah.
Or a very, very nice course.
A very nice course. That's a very nice course. Yeah.
Yeah. So we just wanted to do that to show, really that's only used, there's none. Branching is probably the most complex of the techniques that we've touched on today to implement. And we've taken the 3 most basic ones and put them in a worked example. The performance scorecard to help the learner have a scaffold and understanding of what's going on in the experience. The role selector up front, just to kind of take out some of the unnecessary content. And really the majority of that savings coming from that test out function up front. So we just wanted to put that together to really show you, how it could stack up. So what did
we talk about today?
Yeah. Role selector. I mean, as we've said, I think that's probably the dipping your toe in the water, probably the easiest one to do. Some variables up front that kind of remove or change content based on learner characteristics. Test out. So really giving opportunity to learners to demonstrate competence, being mindful of the fact that the test out needs to be robust to give you kind of credibility and confidence in it. Branching, it's immediate, it's impactful, it's kind of like a test out. You can do quite cool things with it as well. It's a really powerful learning model. If you're going to go full branching, just be mindful of the fact that you need to consider the scope and design investment required. And Cami, anything to say on performance scorecards?
I think it speaks for itself. It brings that performance of, to the forefront for the learner. So creating that more personal hook helps them see where they might have gaps, where they need to work through the content in a different way, see the various consequences of real world situations. We also shared a lot of bonus tips along the way. I hope that was helpful, just to see different ways to personalize. Personalization doesn't have to be about the technology. It can be about the story, the way you write it, talking directly to you, the learner, making them feel really seen and heard through the experience, and tapping into emotions, because nothing's more personal than our emotions. We have a few questions. I've got the pod up. I'm going to start with an easier one first. Zara, you'd asked, does it auto update the approximate time? Is this an adapt? I think that was that menu that had the with the times next to it, and that's hard coded. I mean, that was just we make an assessment on how long a menu a topic will take based on the number of screens or the number of content blocks. So it's not an automatic thing. And it's generally an indicator. Not everyone knows. Everyone's going to take a little bit different time. I might go through it really fast. Paul might, read every single word. He's very meticulous.
Yeah, we kind of like got that legacy kind of calculation of learning time by number of screens, which has always seemed a bit counterintuitive. But I think in the progress indicator on the page, you could use that to indicate what's there and what's been removed, I would imagine.
So there's a great question from Paul Westlake. You know him.
Hello, Westy.
Paul asks, would you suggest using a role selector to support learners with different accessibility needs or neurodiversity needs to show them a different version of the content?
I think that's a really good question. I don't see why you couldn't. I mean, there's also lots of adapt plugins that you've got something called Visibly Now, which has got some really nice accessible kind of functionality as well. So I think you could use that along with a role selector where you could tailor and personalize and optimize your content that resonates with you. Ultimately, it's about providing a learning experience that is most appropriate for the individual. So I don't see why you couldn't.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And then we have a few questions here about tools. So Denise asked, I'm going to ask both of these because I think there's just general discussion about tools. Do you have any info on cost savings for the L&D team if they use a tool like Adapt to create all of this? And then the second question from Anna is how much of what we've seen today is native to Kineo and how much is dependent on the course builder software you use? So I think generally across Kineo, we do a lot of our work in Adapt. Which for those of you who don't know, it is available as an open source tool. Kineo has done a lot of work to adapt to make it sing and shine even more for our custom clients. And that's, if depending on the development partner you're working with, they may or may not be able to do that. And so, but we also do a lot of work in Storyline. So, because it's particularly here in the US market, that's still what a lot of our clients here in the US are using internally, and they want us to build content in the tools that they're already using because they want to be able to maintain it. They want it to look like the other stuff that they're doing. So some of what we can build is dependent on the course software that you're using, but a lot of them have the same features and functionality. So it shouldn't be too dependent on that. Nicole asks, is Adapt an LMS or a product like Storyline? It's like Storyline. It's a course authoring tool. So it is not, it's not the learning management system. And it's the name Adapt does not mean it's adaptive learning content. Sometimes that gets used in relation to personalization. Like you hear that something's adaptive. It's actually because it adapts to your screen. It's responsive. It's a multi-device tool.
It's worth saying with the open source side, as Cami says, it's completely open source. If you want to use the framework or the authoring tool, all of the Git repos are available. You can go there, you can use it. If you've got the in-house expertise, there's no license costs. It's the tool that we develop most of our content in, as do many other large e-learning companies. So it's a well-supported, freely available tool. And it's got a lot of these functions and features kind of baked in.
And so Denise, if it's cost savings for the L&D team, if you're using Adapt or another tool like Storyline, maybe. I mean, it's going to depend. Do you have the team with Adapt has slightly different development skills required. It's not quite like Storyline. You probably don't have to pay a license though for it. So if you've got a lot of seat licenses for Storyline, you're going to need to pay for those. So it just depends on what the needs of your unique training, what your L&D team is how you're constructed, and who you've got, and are you going to need to hire someone, or are you going to want to work externally with a vendor like Kineo? Nicole, yes, we can add the URL for Adapt. It's adaptlearning.org. You can go learn more about the open source tool and the open source community. John Cleve, hey John, do you differentiate adaptive learning, which you often see, and personalized learning? John says, I don't, so curious. I think it's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of tools, to me, like adaptive learning is often about more on the platform side, but I mean, that's just my thinking about it. I'm thinking of tools like Exonify or, tools that say they do adaptive learning. It's often because it's an AI driven approach on the back end.
Based type model, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I think it's semantics, isn't it? We are adapting the content based on inputs from somewhere. I think it's a matter of scale. and sophistication.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't know, John, if that resonates with you. You agree it's semantics. Great. Thank you. Excellent. We have a few minutes left if there are more questions, and we can also let people go off and be free because we've personalized this experience. We really haven't, to save time. That was our intention. We are excited to talk. We have we'll be sending out some links if you would like to set up consultation sessions with our learning team at some point to find out about your next project. Please follow Kineo on all the social places. We try to publish a lot of useful guides and wonderful resources for the community, and hope you find them useful. And reach out if you have questions. We will be sending out the recording to this. There will be a follow-up with this, the booking your one-on-one, and do hunt Paul and I down. We're on the channels.
Yeah.
Not hard to find us.
No, do get in touch, and thanks very much for your time, everyone.